That's good, beep. Hey, what's up, America? Welcome to Goodnight America. I'm America's sweetheart, Eric Ryan. Today's guest, oh boy, he's a smart fellow. Let me tell you about him. His name is Dr. Jon Lieff. Ready? Here's his bio. He's a neuropsychiatrist with a Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics from Yale University and a doctorate in medicine from Harvard Medical School. I've never heard of these places, but they sound nice. You're known as an innovator in several medical fields. He pioneered the creation of integrated treatment units that focus on complex patients with combined medical, psychiatric, and neurological problems, just like me. And you built some of the first geriatric medical slash psychiatry hospital units and the largest geriatric treatment network in New England, which you directed for 25 years. Furthermore, you're an expert and innovator in developing specialized innovative treatment programs for brain-injured patients. Welcome to the show. How's that?
Thank you. Well, nice to be here.
Oh, good. You're also, I don't know if you know this, you wrote a book. It's called The Secret Language of Cells. And what I want to do today is have the dumbest conversation you've ever had about neuroscience. So you ready?
Let's go for it.
Okay. Let me just, I'm going to give you some of my hypotheses and then you can tell me how dumb I am or what a genius I am. I think someone that went to Yale and Harvard, you're qualified for such things. Okay. So this is the thing. I think it's conceptually interesting that when somebody studies the brain, they're using their own brain to observe the brains of others to get a better understanding of itself. Does that make a little bit of sense?
It makes a lot of sense because when you think about it, what is science? Science in the West is basically you and I and a third person look at something together, right, and we agree this is what's going on, and we measure it. And we say, yes, that measurement's okay. And we agree that experiment is so. And we build on that. But it's all based upon you and I looking at something and agreeing. Yeah. And you can't look inside the brain. So that's a problem. So we have our own consciousness. I mean, everyone knows, the one thing everyone knows is their own subjective experience, their experience. Everyone knows that. And then you have scientists trying to say there is no such thing as subjective experience, right, because the Western science can't measure it. Therefore, many scientists just throw it out the door and don't accept that there's consciousness, that there is subjective experience. There's another view, the Eastern religions, the Eastern science says, I can look inside people, I can listen to what they say about their experiences, and I can learn what happens in the so-called mind. And you can study that. The West has not allowed the concept of mind to enter science because you can't measure it with a microscope or an MRI or a tool. You can't measure it. So therefore they say it doesn't exist, which is ridiculous.
But how could it not exist when we're using in an experience and experiencing it right now? That's conceptually very bizarre.
No, of course it exists. In science, it doesn't exist because you can't measure it.
Well, it seems like a big hole. So like right now, my brain is looking to your brain to understand this whole thing. But so I've watched a bunch of your stuff and read a bunch of your stuff. You say at some point, for example, a liver cell. We don't know why a liver cell does what it does. Therefore, if you're thinking logically, you would say it has to be pre-programmed to do whatever it is doing. Correct?
Right.
I mean,
they think everything's a little robot or a little machine, as opposed to it being a thinking creature. That cell is the cell a thinking, living creature like you and I, or is it just a piece of metal, a machine? And Western science has always assumed it has to be just a thing, a piece of metal. It can't be thinking because we can't measure the thinking, and we don't know what thinking is, and we don't know what consciousness is. There's no definition in our science of mind, consciousness, awareness, even life. You can't even define life because every definition, it's a great book by a guy named Zimmer who wrote every definition of life. Like, let's say, some people say it's something that can reproduce. Mm-hmm. Well, once you reach a certain age, a woman can't reproduce, so she's not alive. That's absurd. So the definition that it has to be able to reproduce makes no sense.
No.
And he looks at every single possible definition of life, and all of them fail. We don't know how to define life. We don't know how to define mind, which is where my story begins, because I was searching for the mind. I was trying to figure out, what does mind mean? What is it in modern science? Anyway, I'm sorry. I went off the field a little bit.
No, it's good. I'm just, so if a liver cell, for example, doesn't think and it's just doing what it's programmed to do, it doesn't make it any less alive, right?
Well, but I think it does think. That's what my book shows.
Okay, can I just tell, I'm going to skip ahead in the thing, because I think it's sort of serendipitous that you and I invited you on the show, but just the fact that you exist, and let me tell you why. So I used to float in sensory deprivation chambers. Are you familiar with these things?
Yeah.
Okay, so what they do, I guess, what I've heard is that they put your brain in a theta wave meditation state. So in my experience, it feels a lot like psychedelics. You kind of trip when you're in there.
Yep.
During one of these trips, and listen, I didn't go in having read yours or anybody else's books on this subject, but I started to think about consciousness. And while I'm out there floating in the ether, I was like, it's weird that I think we sort of equate consciousness with size. Hear me out. I think if we look at an elephant, we can go, clearly this thing is thinking and cares about its young and hangs out in packs. And like, it's big. And then you go, us, yes, well, we have consciousness. And I look at my cats and I go, they kind of seem to be aware of what's going on. But when you step on an ant, you don't give that thing any credence because it has no consciousness. So then I started to think, what about cells? What if DNA doesn't mutate by accident? What if it's just hanging out one day and you go, hey, listen, how about a long neck on a giraffe? I don't think it's crazy to think that things that we can't see also think, also feel, also communicate. And you've sort of borne this out. Weird.
Well, yes, I had a path of discovery. As a neuropsychiatrist, a neuroscientist, I always saw medical issues that were people who had brain issues from medical problems, and people who had body problems from mental issues. And I never understood, what is mind? Where is it? Is it in the body? Is it in the brain? So I spent years studying all of this, and pretty quickly I come to the conclusion that there's no center in the brain. There's no center of consciousness. There's no subjective experience. So it really can't be in the brain. It's a whole story we can go into. But if neuroscience, the best neuroscience, has no place in the brain where they can say that's where subjective experience is.
Right.
And if you think about it, if you look at culture and science and literature, it's bigger than one brain. It's just not in my brain. It's in a lot of brains, and we share this kind of thing. So is mind a shared thing that all these? Anyway, I started looking at animals, and you brought up elephants. These animals are highly intelligent, extremely sophisticated and intelligent, way more than people think. I started looking at whales, dolphins are. I started looking at octopus, smaller and smaller. I looked at ants. I've written stuff on ants. You can Google that. Ants are highly intelligent. They're very smart. And I don't mean a hive. I mean a single ant.
Yeah.
Knows all kinds of things. I wrote a whole, several posts on that. But then bees understand symbolic logic. Bees understand, they have a language. Bees can know the angle of the sun in order to direct people to the best flower out of thousands of flowers. They communicate this and make decisions together. Termites build a structure that is far more sophisticated than any. It's like the Twin Towers as a refrigeration unit. It's way beyond our engineering. And if you break it, you cut it, they surround it with their army, and they rebuild it exactly the way it's supposed to be rebuilt. How do they know how to do this? Well, no one knows.
Well, can I just, for a second, I want you to continue along this line, but this is the thing that fascinates me. They seem to have been programmed to understand how to do these things because there's no books. There's no paper. They're not reading the internet and figuring out how to do these things. They obviously come pre-programmed. And if a liver cell, you don't think? Yeah.
Well, we don't know how much is programmed and how much is intelligence. Uh, are we pre-programmed? Are
Well,
we?
that's my question. Are
Well,
we?
well, a little bit. There is. They used to think that the infant, when they're born, doesn't have myelinating sections in the brain, and the brain gradually myelinates as the baby stiffens the neck and then stands up, and this is a myelination. But when a baby is born, one particular area deep inside the brain is completely myelinated. And it was just recently discovered in the last year or so. That turns out to be an area about language. So the mystery of language is the mystery of pre-programming versus intelligence, and we don't have an answer for that. But I kept searching, where is this intelligence? Smaller and smaller animals, and then I found that bacteria, very simple cells, they're not so simple, but they're simpler than our cells. Our cells are 1,000 times larger and a vast civilization compared to a bacteria. Bacteria, though very complicated, they are very intelligent and they communicate and they make decisions together. And then I kept going and I found viruses that are just basically a molecule, an RNA or a DNA molecule. They are intelligent and they communicate and they send signals. So that's when I realized I had to write a book. So I basically am taking Western science, the best. I took it only from Science Magazine, Nature Magazine, the absolute cream of the crop of the best research available is what my book is based on. Every single line and fact is based upon a proven article of Western science. And I basically show that cells are highly intelligent, very sophisticated, communicating. Now, if cells are intelligent, what does that mean? And what does that mean for us? For our brain, we're made of cells, and we're made of both trillions of human cells and trillions of bacteria and other cells. Uh, all of these cells are somehow contributing to our consciousness. So anyway, that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to show, and since by the way, when I wrote the book in 2020, I had been researching it for 10 years before that, but came out in 2020, which was in the middle of COVID, unfortunately, or maybe it didn't get as widespread as it could have if COVID wasn't around. But although I have a section about COVID in my virus chapter, when it came out, it was extremely unpopular in the scientific community to say that cells are intelligent. This was a really radical viewpoint. Now, some people had expressed it, but they were ridiculed and horribly treated in the scientific establishment. So, and I was too. 5 years later now, there's a strong cadre of very reputable scientists who absolutely show in multiple books and multiple articles that cells are indeed intelligent. And that's become now hard to refute, although I'd say 95% of scientists don't think about it and therefore disagree with it. But that those who study the issue now can see that cells are intelligent. I have been going deeper, like you said, also. Is intelligence deeper than a cell? Well, the last chapter of my book was about a molecule
Oh, Jesus.
that I show behaves as if it's intelligent also. Anyway, I'm doing all the talking. So.
No, it's fine. Well, listen, if if molecules are intelligent and cells are intelligent and viruses are intelligent and we're mostly viruses and we don't know where the mind is, who's in charge here? Who's doing the thinking right now? Have you figured that out?
Well, you are and I am and all the listeners
Supposedly.
and all the listeners are in their mind, and we are in some ways jointly participating in something bigger that we are all sharing, which you experience in your floating experiment. you experience, which occurs in that, it occurs with psychedelics, it occurs with near-death experience, it occurs with meditation and religious practices, the experience of something larger and some connection. But we don't have to go into mysticism, just science or culture or music is shared. And so therefore, we all know that we're part of something bigger.
When you're floating out in the ether, especially in sensory deprivation tanks, it's not as if you don't feel whole. You're separate from your body, but you still feel very there, you know? And I've often said, you know, when we have a few people on mushrooms, you seem to vibe at the same level too. There seems to
Well,
be a
with
thing.
mushrooms, it depends. And I don't know if I said this or not, but if you look into my background in 1969 to 1972, it kind of gives away my age. I taught at the Kennedy School of Government on psychedelics, and I was doing some of the original research when it was still legal, by the way. Those of us who were studying it at
Good
that
old days. Oh, what a
it
time
was
to be
legal.
alive.
We had a LSD came in a vial from Sandoz Pharmaceuticals of 100 micrograms.
We used to be a proper society. What happened?
You could put it in a beaker and take 50 milligrams, 20 milligrams, 10. So you could microdose or macrodose, or psilocybin you could send away, and a package would come of psilocybin mushrooms or cactus or peyote cactus, and they'd come to the Yale post office. So I learned then that there were two basic, and when I taught at Harvard, I had all the best experts, all the top, I had a lot of money to bring people in. So the two major experts in LSD at that time were Grof and Pankey. Stanislav Grof later became a great psychoanalyst and philosopher of mystical states and all that. And Pankey, so Grof was the microdosing guy, and Pankey was the psychedelic therapy, the macrodosing guy. You go through a big splash experience. And the big experience is more dissolving. So the ego and the sense of self dissolves more, and you have more of that sense of being part of something bigger. Now, is it really something bigger or not? Well, depends upon what you believe. Science isn't going to prove it. There was a good book by Aldous Huxley at that time. He was part of the Harvard experiments that I was measuring their blood at that time, and I wrote papers in the American Journal of Psychiatry. Aldous Huxley wrote a book about the doors of perception, meaning, is this a glimpse into what is really the what we are sharing, what all of us share together, which is what a lot of religions believe, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very threatening to a Western science view because we can't explain it in the same concrete notions, although the concrete notions that we have in quantum mechanics are really become quite fuzzy, and they're quite mystical in their own respect. So anyway, I'm doing too much.
Oh, listen, you're the guest. You're supposed to do the talking. Here's a question I have. So we've looked at the brain. Probably, I don't know, how many brains have we dissected at this point? Really gotten into them, looked at them at a cellular level. If we still can't find consciousness there, at some point, doesn't Western medicine go, listen, it's unexplainable. It is a little mystic, you know, and just accept that? Because the soul, like there's certain things that are just not measurable. When are we going to move on?
Right. Correct. And there are those who are trying now to measure it, and they're doing it. You know, the natural instinct is to try MRIs and try, you know, there's a lot of hype in neuroscience. Well, people say, well, I did an MRI and that shows the brain does this. The problem with that is that what the MRI measures, you know what a pixel is. Everyone knows what a pixel is. It's the dot of light on your screen. The voxel is the dot of light in an MRI machine. And that three-dimensional pixel measures the flow of blood of about 70,000 neurons. It doesn't measure neurons, and it doesn't measure mental capacity. It measures blood flow in 70,000 neurons in a second, about a second. The truth is, and so they say, well, that part of the brain relates to blah, 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 relates to hunger, relates to this, that, and the other. The problem with all this is that the brain is sending signals in milliseconds. By the time that second goes by, 1,000 different things have happened all over the brain. And you're not even measuring the neurons' actions. You're measuring blood flow, which they're assuming is because the neuron is acting. So the fact is that blood flow could have been after fact, not before, and it might have nothing to do with it. So all of the neuroscience you're hearing is all questionable,
Yeah.
and has a lot of hype because they want the money. They want the money for the research. So they say, I've proven blah, 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 blah. And the top experts will acknowledge that in truth, we have not found a point in the brain that represents this. Now, I'm not again. I like the research. I'm not opposed to the research. I think we just have to really understand it and see what do we know and what don't we know. We're learning a lot. We're learning about circuits and all this anyway, but we're not answering the fundamental question that you have of what is this consciousness supposedly in my brain. If you ask any scientist, 90% will say, oh, the brain makes the mind. But there's really no evidence of that.
There's no evidence, but I think it kind of makes sense a little bit. For instance, if you hit me in the arm with a shovel, I can still do math. You whack me hard enough on the head, I might forget some things, you know what I mean? Not act like myself, so there does seem to be a brain damage, cognizant thought connection somewhere.
Could it be a receiver?
That's what I was going to ask you. Is it possible that just the antenna is in our brain goo and we're tapping into something out there? That might hold some water.
Anything is possible. We don't know. The answer is we don't know how this works.
Yeah, if you break my antenna and I can't tap into the ether, well, now I'm a little.
And we don't know why you and I and every one of the listeners has mind, because that's obvious to us, even though science wants to say no because they can't figure it out. But how does it mean that an ant has mind? How does it mean that a plant has mind? What does it mean that a cell has mind? Those are even bigger questions.
Why is science being such a dick about this? Because I've watched documentaries too about mycelium and how they're communicating underneath the soil. And, okay, we can explain
the real reason.
Yeah.
And I might get in trouble here.
Okay, I do.
So in religion, in my view, there are good things, very good things, and there's some very bad things. And the very bad things are dogma.
Sure.
Where people say this is true, even though it isn't, and there's no evidence of that. The fact that some of the stuff in religion is fantastic doesn't mean it's not true. Miracles, etc. We don't know that that's not true, but to say XYZ is true, like the earth is flat and, so that group of fanatical religion is against science. So in reaction to that, you have an equally fanatic group of scientists.
Yeah, they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
That are just as extreme as the people that they detest on the other side. And these scientists say everything is random. There's no intelligence in molecules and in cells. There can't be. And they make a dogma, just like the other extreme people make a dogma. And you have these two dogmas fighting, when in reality, the good people in the middle.
Right.
There's
the unsexy middle is where the truth is.
There's really no conflict about it. So this is because, Western academic science has been terrorized by the fanatical scientists who say everything has to be random and there's no intelligence in cells and there's no intelligence in in life when there obviously is, and it's just that we don't understand it.
Right. And this is the annoying thing too. It's just like on the one side, people go, this is unexplainable. There must be a God. The other side saying this is unexplainable, but there's no God, so it doesn't exist. That's a dumb way to look at it, because even if there is a creator, he's made this shit very hard to figure out. So we have, there's going to be some, it's going to take some time. Here's the other thing too. The light bulb was invented, 130 years ago? We're making a lot of progress very quickly. So
Right.
just because we can't explain everything doesn't mean it's not explainable. Just give us, not us, the royal us. I'm not doing it, but you are.
The religion became a form of evolution and DNA, a science religion. And unfortunately, that's unfortunate, because there's no question evolution occurs, although you have fanatics on the other side saying, no, it doesn't occur. What's missing in the new form of understanding of evolution is the understanding that the cells are inherently intelligent, and that changes evolution. It changes the decisions that cells make determine evolution. So
yes,
the cognitive qualities of the cells are determining what happens. It's not that evolution didn't occur, and anyone who says it does is denying an enormous amount of data. Just,
yeah. And why? Because it's new and different. I mean, that's what
years and years and years of fossils. You can't deny evolution. That's stupid. But you also can't say evolution happens only because of random things. That isn't true either. Now, there are random things, obviously. There are hurricanes and things happen. There's a lot of randomness in nature, but there's a lot of non-randomness in nature. And we're just beginning to understand how it fits together.
It annoys me so much. I mean, it kind of makes me feel better, because humans are all the same, even smart scientist humans, where they just believe in a certain thing the way everybody else does. And when presented with new information, they hold their ground, where you would think if there was any profession where new information would be meaningful, it would be science. Let me ask you this, though, about smart cells, because you said this thing somewhere that you said cancer cells are very smart. Yeah.
Very smart.
Okay. So I've always thought, and the macro idea, I think, is that organisms, like the whole point of us being here is to procreate and to push forward our species, to make babies and then die. Cancer cells are ostensibly smart, but
it's the random crowd saying that. Okay.
Right. I'm saying this is the general zeitgeist, right? The whole point of life is to make more of the thing that you are. With cancer cells, though, you're saying they're intelligent, and I don't know if they are or not. I'm defaulting to the expert. But if the cancer cells win, don't they die because they kill their host, and the host takes them with them? So doesn't that
notion that everything is competitive, and this notion you very clearly spoke, is the accepted, totally unproven view
right.
of the current establishment in science. There's no evidence of any of that. The fact is, there's as much cooperation in cellular level, in human level, in every level, plant level, plants and humans, plants and animals. There's as much cooperation and intelligence as there is competition and randomness. All of this is happening. So there isn't this simple formula of the meaning and purpose of life. That life also assumes, humans made it to the top. We're the king of the mountain. We're the best. And therefore we can destroy the earth or do whatever we feel like.
Right. See, this has come up in every episode. We are binary absolutists. So we must believe that we have to have a simple truth to explain the complex situation. And I think that's what this is too. Because I was going to ask you the other thing too. There's a lot of things that are good for us that we don't do, even though we know it's good for us. And like, you're a vegetarian, for example. That's probably what everybody should be. You meditate. That's probably what everybody should do. We know this about the human condition. We know that it would prolong life and make us feel better. The vast majority of us eat bacon, and myself included, cheeseburgers. I drink exponentially more than I meditate. So there's a little bit of I don't know that it's a cognizant pull towards death and destruction, but it certainly feels good when I'm doing it. As opposed, but I know that it's bad. I do it anyway. So I guess my point is, if it was just to live longer, make more babies, I'd be doing that. It's not what I'm doing. I'm destroying myself, and so is everybody else.
Well, I'm not sure what to say about that. You obviously haven't reached the point where you see that these practices are hurting you, and maybe you will, and maybe you won't.
I do. I was a vegetarian for 5 years. I used to take care of it. I think part of it is
It's
where
hard. It's very hard to be a vegetarian.
yes, and we're
In
pleasure-seeking machines. We love hedonism. Which is
Well,
another thing that's odd.
the whole society is not set up for it. It's not. It takes a lot of work. Uh, you have to cook vegetables. You have to cook grains.
Right? It sucks. It doesn't
It's
taste as good.
more and more instant things are happening, but it's not easy to be a vegetarian. And I'm not saying everyone should be a vegetarian.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying you are either, and I'm not saying everyone. Look, I don't care what anybody eats. We're all going to be dead soon anyway. But my point is, as intelligent beings, we have certain information. We know that it would be better for us, that we would live longer, probably longer and healthier. And we still don't do it. So I'm just going back to that notion that the whole reason you should be alive is to procreate, and that
I think there's a unique amount of stress in our lifestyle that, while life has always been stressful, and probably running from wild animals is stressful, and living in the Middle Ages was stressful.
yeah,
We have a unique kind of stress of this multitasking, excessive demand, where we have to be 24/7, and our nervous system and hormonal system is just not set up for it. And we're living in a society that is revving up too much.
yeah.
Some of the rev up is very good, and some of the things that, if we could take the positive things and slow down the demands on people and the inequalities that occur, it would be better. But right now, we're damaging the earth. I mean, the truth is, and a quite a number of people don't seem to care. It doesn't seem to make any difference. I always say, whatever happens, the microbes are going to be here, and they're going to win. They're not going away. And it's funny. You had this big oil spill.
Hmm.
This was many years ago in the Gulf. Everybody says, "Oh my God, it's going to destroy life." The microbes went in and ate it, and it was cleaned up much faster than people thought. In Chernobyl, it's not a happy place to live for us, but the microbes don't care. They're doing well, and certain animals are doing well.
The microbe shall inherit the earth. I
They
do.
they are inheriting the earth. They are 80% of life on the planet, and we just don't get it. We don't realize we're just a dressing, although we're changing a lot. But everything could burn up and it would still regrow. Something else would regrow after that.
I do feel a little bad for humans in the sense that for 300,000 years, we've been running away from animals, building fires outside, trying to stay warm, trying to grow a few root vegetables so our offspring doesn't die. Infant mortality was awful. Then all of a sudden, we come into this new age, this last 200 years, and we have Twinkies and we have air conditioning, we have cable, and then they're like, yeah, all that's bad. We've been craving salt and sugar and just living a long time for a long time. We finally have it, and then it's like, oh, this is the worst thing in the world. So it's tough. I give us a little bit of enjoy a couple Twinkies, right?
I have nothing against Twinkies.
Every vegetarian, so
everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation.
Everything, you can have whatever you want, but you have to do it in a balanced way, so that you don't hurt yourself.
That makes sense. Okay, so we know that science doesn't know an awful lot about consciousness or the mind, but we do know some things, like what's good for the brain. Can you run down the things that are objectively good for the brain that we know that we should be doing?
Yes, and everything I write on my posts and in my book is based upon only proven science. I don't speculate. There's a lot of speculation in science, and I'm not opposed to speculation, but scientists should say I'm speculating.
Right.
They should, when they announce I've proven blah 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 blah, and they haven't,
Yeah.
and then
Say I've
everyone,
kind of proven it, and then there's room for negotiation.
yeah, I kind of proven it, but if you give me a couple $1 million, I'll be able to prove it better.
That's a better way to approach it, I think.
Yeah, that's, a lot of it's just advertisements to get money. I think they should be more honest.
Mhm.
And I think that, so what I'm writing about is what is known,
Yep.
not, so the one thing, so the brain, we know, is an organ in the body, like any other organ. It's made of cells. It's kind of squishy. If you look at it, it's sort of jello-like. And it needs to be treated the way you would treat an organ of the body. So, for example, you can't give it too much dirt and toxins and expect it to
Right.
take care of that. It has to clean itself, and cells are only used to cleaning food, actually, and stuff from the earth and stuff from animals, other animals. They're not used to all these new chemicals that we're inventing.
Mhm.
So we have all kinds of chemicals and plastic coming into these organs that they have no history and no evolutionary guidance. Evolution means spending 1,000,000 years figuring out how to deal with it. And so there are things, brain has to clean itself, and there are mechanisms to clean itself. Um, so two things that we touch on in cleaning the organ is sleep and food. And so I'll take sleep first. So what's well known, we don't understand dreaming and we don't understand sleep very much. We do know that we need to sleep, and pretty much all animals do, and some cells even do. But and to say we know what all the brain waves mean isn't true. We know there's deep sleep, and we know that deep sleep helps memory of a certain kind. And we know that light sleep helps memory of a certain kind. Napping helps memory of a certain kind. Sleep is good, and we don't sleep enough in our society. People need probably hours more than they think they do.
How much should we get? What's the magic number? Eight is
That's
conventional.
the thing. There is no magic number. Everyone's a little different. It's somewhere between 6 and 10.
Oh.
Um, some people can do with less, and some people absolutely need more. And to say it has to be 8 is ridiculous. Many years ago, centuries ago, people slept like 2 hours and then got up and did some things and slept another 2, 3 hours. Benjamin Franklin did that. And there's a cycle, about an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's called the one cycle. And it goes through stages 1, 2, 3, 4, which is deep. And then it goes up and there's dreaming. And every stage is essential. And we tend to do 3 or 4 cycles or 5. And as the cycles go, we get less of the stage 4. As you get older, we get less of the stage 4. Stage 4 is that very, very deep sleep. I used to lecture, do you remember? I've been talking to a group of older doctors, and I'm saying, do you remember when you were a teenager and you went out on a date and you went to a dance and you danced and you danced and you were just so happy and you got exhausted. You stayed up till 2 a.m. and then you came home and you crashed and you were so tired you slept until 2 p.m. and you woke feeling just great.
Yeah.
I said, yes, I understand. Of course, none of you understand that anymore because older people don't have that kind of sleep anymore. They don't have that deep, restful sleep that younger people have. They sleep lighter. In any case, during sleep, there's a cleaning service. So in the brain, what we've learned is that the fluid, it's a complicated story, the fluid in the brain. I've written posts on it. It's really complicated. But the bottom line is that fluid comes in from the arteries, streams across the brain cells, taking the junk out, these proteins that the clumps of proteins that cause all the serious diseases, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all kinds of diseases are from clumps of proteins. And the brain naturally cleans that in 3 different ways. When you sleep, neurons shrink They have more space, there's more flow, more cleaning. Sleep cleans the brain. Not only does it clean the brain, but it helps figure out what was important of your memories during the day, solidifying the important ones and getting rid of ones that don't matter. So it's important for learning and it's important for cleaning the brain. So food, what I'm saying is this organ's trying to clean itself, and it has all kinds of chemicals that it doesn't know how to get rid of because it's never seen these before. So the most important thing in food is not to eat chemicals. Eat food. Eat natural. I mean, natural. It's hard for natural. I don't want to get crazy with expensive, it's called natural food. I mean, eat real food. If you're going to eat meat, hopefully with no chemicals in it. And if you're going to eat plants. Don't eat chemicalized plants. Don't eat things that are chopped up and chemicals added and all kinds of preservatives. So the bottom line is you go to the supermarket and you look at that thing, what's in it. And if you can't figure out what's in it, don't buy it. So if you look down the list and there's a bunch of letters, capital letters, that you have no idea what the hell these letters are, those are chemicals. Don't eat them. That's the most important thing about food. Then there's exercise. Exercise is very, very important, but not too much exercise. And enough can be simply walking a little bit every day. It doesn't have to be fanatical. More is better up to a point of hurting yourself. So the fanatical, crazy, ultra this and that is not important and it's damaging often. Then there is using the brain. There's an important thing in biology, use it or lose it. And using the brain means building these connections, building the entire brain together. I've written about it as whole brain neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity means it's the science of how the brain changes as it learns things. So the brain makes itself better by practice. We all know that. We practice something, we get better at it, unless we practice it too much, in which case it makes us crazy. So you have to practice things. And the more we use the brain, the better. But the trick is not just to use the brain, but to use it for meaningful things that mean something to you, because that adds many dimensions of circuits in the brain. When something means something, and I give the example not in my book. My book is about cells, but in my posts, I give the example of a musical event. In that musical event, I think you mentioned that when we were talking previously. In that musical event, you're dancing, so the body's moving. You're moving in a rhythm. Rhythm has very good effects on the brain. You know the melody, so you're thinking of the melody. You know the band. You know the history of the band, so you're thinking of. You know all the history of the band. You know all your friends are around. You know them, and all of this is going on in the brain. This huge amount of things are going on. And so the brain is exploding, and it's called whole brain learning. So the brain, and those are wonderful experiences, that experience. Now you add to it the religious dimension, like in a gospel choir or your favorite religious group. You add to that musical event a spiritual meaning, and then phrases that you know from the Bible or whatever religion, that adds another dimension to the, and that's very, very powerful experience, and that's good for the brain.
See, this is one of those things when we talked about it before. I read about this years ago in this book called Religion for Atheists. And his point was they do a lot of stuff that makes a lot of sense. So the secular world could take from that. And I grew up Catholic. And if you look at a Catholic church service, you're sitting, you're standing, you're kneeling. You do the little peace be with you handshake. There's singing, the person's talking, you're all together, it's communal, and the sacraments, you're eating and drinking together too. It is a full body experience. And I think they know that sinks in better than sitting around and like at a university, you're just sitting in the thing, looking at a guy talk for an hour. That is probably less powerful than a full blown church service. And religion knows this.
Well, yes. So whatever is meaningful is what matters to the brain. It could be crocheting.
Yeah.
It could be gardening. It could be reading. It could be whatever. So use the brain for things that are meaningful. That's what's important. Now, there's one added thing, and I don't understand this, but I sort of do, but it's proven. There's no question about it. There's a very unique thing of taking the brain into nature. And if experiments are done where you put a little beanie, which is an EEG machine, and you just walk into a lane in the woods, you're in a meditative state. Just being in the woods. In a hospital, if you have a flower on your little thing there, you do better. You feel better. If you, in a city, you can look down the street and see a tree, you do better. Or if you have plants in your apartment, and if you can spend time in nature, it has. Now, why is this true? I don't know. I have, so this is speculation. I mean, it is true, so we can say that, but why is it true? Well, we are really a yin and yang with plants. We eat plants. They breathe out oxygen. We breathe in oxygen, and they breathe the CO2. We are really part of the same thing. And so there's an inherent connection. Now, whether that is why it is just healthier to be in nature, I don't know, but it is healthier to be in nature.
So being in nature helps. Now, you've said that isolation is bad for the brain, right?
Isolation? What do you mean by that?
Not being around. So let's say in the incel culture today, playing video games by yourself all day, as opposed to having relationships.
I didn't say that.
You're not. I'm adding on to it because this is a thing I like to talk about is the epidemic of male loneliness. But isolation, if you're just living by yourself in an apartment with no friends, I would imagine that that's not particularly good for your head either. Is there anything that you've done that suggests scientifically why that might be?
You talked about the male. There is a male problem. I think what happened is that historically, our culture treated women very badly and very disrespectfully. And this was ingrained in their psyche and in the men's psyche. And the whole masculine thing was to be superior to women in some way. And I'm not saying everyone's like that, but it's sort of ingrained in our culture.
Yeah, it was a
and
thing.
then as we became aware of that as a culture, things swung too far and they went against boys to the point where boys aren't supposed to be rowdy, for example,
Right.
in school. You know, there's something wrong with that. Sit down. You have to sit. If they don't have gym, it'd be unnatural
Right.
for a boy to have to sit all day and not have gym. And we've eliminated these outlets, and the learning style should be adapted to boys. So whereas before everything was way too anti-girl and pro-boy, today it's the opposite, and the boys are suffering. So we have to
grow up to suffer.
come back to the middle and treat both with respect, and both need somewhat different educational things. So we need to do that.
See, this is again goes back to my theory that the real problem is that we're binary absolutists. If you could just say that this needs a little of that and that needs a little of that, and both things are okay, and that's fine, but we never get there. Why?
Why are we not going to get there? Well, we're extremists, and the pendulums swing.
But here's the fucked up thing. Our brain knows that we're extremists. Like my brain is saying that right now. If you explain it to people, to go, yeah, that makes sense. But then we never act on it. And this is very frustrating.
I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict the future in our culture. I think we're coming to certain crossroads, and the good people need to step up and
You
take
know,
charge. So
the problem of what we perceive as the good side is that we're trying to win over people with logic, and I think we
I
need to
don't
do it
mean
more
the
with
good
emotion.
side. I mean good people
Well,
of either side. That means people who show respect. So to me, if you look at every religion, in every religion, there is a group of good people, and they believe in love, and they believe in caring for people. They believe in working to help people, helping poor people, helping sick people. Um, and all those good people, my understanding is they understand that the God that they worship is the same God for all of these people. But then you get the fanatics who say, my way is the only way. And if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you. And they are the ones that are the problem. And there are good people in every religion and every group. And at some point in the world today, they need to stand up and get together.
should we start? Me and you? You want to do it?
Let's go for it.
It's got to start somewhere.
Although that's assuming you and I are the good people, and I don't know about that.
Oh, I'm positive I'm a good person. That's the psychedelics talking.
I'm
But,
joking. I try to be.
well, I don't really try that hard. You could guide me. All right. You're the head good guy. I'll be like the vice president of the good guys. You're in charge, though. You have the credentials and you've written a book. So it seems like you should be the one.
Well, what I've learned from having the best credentials, and I tell this to young people, is if you've been to the best schools, you know that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean a damn thing. And when you've met Nobel Prize winners who are jerks, you know that where you go to school makes no difference whatsoever. What matters is what you do with it. What matters is whether you work hard, whether you have this meaning, whether you have a purpose, whether you're going to work hard to do what you want to do and to become good at it. That's what matters. It doesn't make any difference what school you go to.
Coming from a guy that went to Yale and Harvard, that makes me feel better. So thank you for saying that. Although, listen, I went to school in Massachusetts. We have the best education system. Well, actually, I didn't.
No,
I went to college here, but not.
That's an illusion. I tell people it's the Harvard Yale delusion.
Harvard, Yale.
If only I had been to Harvard and Yale, then blah, 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 blah. It's just not true. It's just not true. There are a lot of people who go to these good schools, don't make it as people.
Oh, yeah. They're not betting 1,000. Sure.
No, it's way different from that. I'm saying it makes absolutely no difference what school. What matters is what you do with your knowledge, whether you learn, whether you apply yourself, whether you work hard. That's what matters.
I think this is commandment number 1 in our new religion. So we just got something done in this hour. Listen, it is coming up on the hour. Do me a favor, stay in the green room for a second, but I'm going to log off the official broadcast, and we will be back tomorrow. Good night, America. Sign up for a religion. It's going to be great. Free Sandwich Wednesdays. I think that's going to be a thing. I'll talk to John about it.